John and Mary had been happily married for nearly 10 years. They lived in a small, quiet neighborhood where most people knew each other by name. Their little house wasn't fancy, but it was their safe place, a place filled with love, laughter, and many memories. The kitchen was their favorite room. It was where they spent the best moments of their day, sharing breakfast, planning their future, and sometimes just sitting quietly together. One bright Saturday morning, the sun poured through the kitchen window, lighting up the room with a warm golden glow. The smell of freshly brewed coffee mixed with the sweet scent of pancakes cooking on the stove. Mary hummed a soft tune while flipping the last pancake, and John set the table with 2 plates and a small vase of fresh daisies from their garden. "Looks perfect," John said with a smile as he poured syrup over the pancakes. Mary smiled back, her eyes shining with happiness. "It's our little tradition. Saturday mornings are just for us." They sat down together, savoring the simple joy of their breakfast. The world outside seemed peaceful and everything felt just right. But little did they know their calm morning was about to change. Suddenly, there was a sharp knock at the front door. John looked up, surprised, because they didn't expect any visitors so early. "I wonder who that is," he said quietly. Mary wiped her hands on a towel and stood up to answer the door. As she opened it, her smile faded. Standing there was Karen, their next-door neighbor. Karen was known in the neighborhood for being outspoken and a little difficult at times. She was the kind of person who often complained about small things, but Mary had always tried to be kind and polite to her. "Good morning, Karen," Mary said politely. Karen didn't smile. Instead, she looked straight past Mary into the kitchen. Her eyes landed on the breakfast table where the pancakes and coffee waited. "I need to talk to you," Karen said sharply. Mary felt a little uneasy but nodded. "Sure, come in." Karen stepped inside without waiting for an invitation. John watched silently from his chair, unsure of what was coming next. Karen's eyes were fixed on the plate of pancakes. "Why are you eating my food?" she asked, her voice low but firm. John's eyes widened. "Your food?" "Karen, we bought these groceries ourselves. We cooked breakfast in our own kitchen." Karen shook her head. "No, I saw the delivery yesterday. That was my order. You took it." Mary's heart began to race. "Karen, I think there's been a mistake. We have receipts from the store. We bought everything ourselves." Karen ignored the receipts and pointed her finger at them. "I'm calling the police." "You're stealing from me." John stood up slowly. "Please, Karen, there's no need for that. We're just having breakfast." Karen's phone was already in her hand. She was dialing 911 before John or Mary could say another word. Mary felt a mix of confusion, fear, and sadness all at once. Why would Karen think they would do such a thing? How could a simple breakfast turn into a serious problem? John placed his hand gently on Mary's shoulder. "Stay calm," he whispered. "We'll explain everything." Karen was already talking loudly into the phone, telling the operator that 2 people were stealing her food right now in their kitchen. The neighbors might have heard the loud voices, but no one came over. It was a quiet street, and people usually minded their own business. John looked at Karen and said softly, "Karen, this isn't right. Please listen to us," but Karen's face was hard. She seemed angry, and her eyes were filled with suspicion. Mary felt tears prick at her eyes, but she blinked them away. This was their home, their kitchen, and their life. How could anyone take that away from them? The minutes felt like hours. Then in the distance, John heard the sound of sirens. The police were coming. Mary sat down slowly, wrapping her arms around herself. John moved to stand near the door, ready to explain everything to the officers. When the police arrived, they stepped inside quietly. They looked serious but calm. The officers asked John and Mary to explain what was happening. John spoke clearly and honestly. "We bought all the groceries ourselves. We were just having breakfast when Karen came in and accused us of stealing her food." The officers looked at the receipts John handed over. One officer asked, "Where did you get this?" John answered, "From the local supermarket just yesterday." Mary showed the officers the kitchen and the packages of food that were still unopened in their fridge. Everything matched their story. The officers looked at Karen, who was still insisting they were thieves. But her story didn't have proof. The officers spoke kindly but firmly. "We need to make sure there is no misunderstanding. For now, please stay calm." John and Mary breathed a small sigh of relief but still felt hurt. They hadn't done anything wrong, but the trust in their neighborhood had been shaken. As the officers left after finishing their questions, Karen stormed out of the house without saying a word. John turned to Mary and took her hand. "Let's clean up and try to forget this morning." Mary nodded but whispered, "It won't be easy." For the rest of the day, they tried to hold on to their peace. But every time they looked at the empty plates or the quiet kitchen, they remembered how quickly things had changed. They wondered why Karen had acted that way, and what had made her so angry. But mostly they worried about what would happen next. Their small, peaceful life had been interrupted by a moment of anger and misunderstanding. But through it all, John and Mary knew one thing for sure. They had each other, and that was the strongest thing in their world. The morning sunlight had long faded when John and Mary finally sat down in their living room. The quiet that now filled the house was heavy, almost painful. The bright and cheerful kitchen where they had once enjoyed pancakes and coffee now felt strange and cold. Mary held a mug of tea, her hands trembling slightly as she stared out the window. John sat beside her, rubbing her back softly, but even he felt helpless. "How could Karen do that?" Mary asked quietly. "How could she think we would take something from her, something that isn't ours?" John sighed deeply. "I don't know, Mary, I really don't. It just doesn't make sense. We've lived here for years, and we've always been kind to everyone, especially her." Mary nodded. "Maybe she was having a bad day. Maybe something is wrong with her." John shook his head. "That's no excuse for what she did. Accusing us of stealing and calling the police on us, her neighbors. It's not right." For a few moments they sat in silence, both lost in their thoughts. Mary's eyes welled with tears again, but this time she let them fall. "It hurts, John. It hurts that someone we know, someone we see almost every day, could treat us like criminals." John took her hand gently. "I know, Mary, but we have to stay strong. We know the truth. That's what matters." The next day, the couple tried to go about their routine. John went to work and Mary stayed home, trying to clean and organize the kitchen. But the memory of Karen's accusations and the police visit stayed with them like a shadow. As Mary washed dishes, she heard a soft knock at the door. She wasn't sure if she wanted to answer. Who could it be? She opened the door carefully and found Sarah, their close friend from down the street. Sarah's face was kind but serious. "Mary, I heard what happened this morning," Sarah said softly. "Are you okay?" Mary smiled weakly. "We're fine, thanks to John. But it's hard to believe something like this could happen." Sarah nodded. "It's so unfair. Karen has always been a little difficult, but this is different. I don't know what made her act this way." Mary invited Sarah inside, grateful for the company. As they sat in the living room, Sarah's presence brought some comfort. "She's always been jealous of you, you know," Sarah said quietly. "Your garden, your happy life. Karen never talks about her own struggles. Maybe she feels alone." Mary thought about it. "Maybe you're right. But that doesn't mean she should treat us like this." "No, it doesn't," Sarah agreed. "But sometimes people act out because they feel hurt inside." They talked for a long time, sharing memories and stories about Karen and the neighborhood. Sarah promised to help if John and Mary needed anything. After Sarah left, Mary felt a little lighter. It helped to talk about the situation with someone who understood. Meanwhile, John had his own challenges at work. Some co-workers had heard about the incident and whispered behind his back. One of them even joked about how John must be stealing neighbors' food now. John ignored the comments but felt anger building inside him. How could people jump to conclusions without knowing the full story? It reminded him how easy it was for misunderstandings to spread and cause pain. That evening, John and Mary sat together again in their kitchen, the place that had become a symbol of both happiness and pain. "We can't let this ruin us," John said firmly. "We have to show Karen and everyone else who we really are." Mary nodded. "Maybe we should invite some neighbors over for dinner. Let them see who we really are, kind, honest people." John smiled. "That's a great idea." The next day they began preparing for a small gathering. They wanted to bring light and warmth back into their home and their hearts. As they cooked together, Mary looked at John and said, "No matter what happens, I'm glad I have you." John kissed her forehead. "Me too, Mary, we're stronger than this," but even as they planned, the fear remained. Fear that Karen might return or that the neighborhood might never fully trust them again. One afternoon, while Mary was gardening outside, Karen appeared at the fence. Mary froze, unsure of what to expect. Karen's face was softer this time, but her eyes still held a flicker of anger. "Mary," Karen said quietly, "I'm sorry about what happened. I don't know what came over me. Mary took a deep breath. Thank you, Karen. It was very hurtful, but I believe we can move past it. Karen looked away. I've been going through a lot lately. I didn't mean to hurt you. Mary smiled gently. We all have hard times. Maybe we can help each other instead of fighting. Karen nodded slowly. Maybe you're right. As Karen walked away, Mary felt a small hope growing inside her. Maybe this was the beginning of something new. That evening, John and Mary sat in their kitchen again, talking about the day. Do you think Karen really means it? Mary asked. John smiled softly. I hope so. Sometimes people just need a little kindness to find their way. Mary looked around their kitchen, their home, their safe place. It still felt warm and bright despite everything. Together, they knew they would face whatever came next, side by side, with love and patience. The morning after Karen's quiet apology, John and Mary tried to return to their usual routine. The sun shone brightly, casting warm light into their kitchen where they prepared breakfast with hopeful hearts. The air felt a little lighter, as if the tension from the day before was slowly fading. John placed 2 plates of scrambled eggs and toast on the table, while Mary poured fresh orange juice into 2 glasses. They sat down together, grateful for this moment of peace. But as they ate, a faint sound of sirens filled the distance. John frowned and looked out the window. Do you think something's wrong? Mary asked, her voice soft but worried. Before John could answer, the front doorbell rang loudly, breaking the calm of the morning. John stood and opened the door. To his surprise, 2 police officers stood there, their faces serious but not angry. Good morning, sir. One officer said politely. We received a call from your neighbor, Karen. She reported that there was a problem here. John nodded slowly. Yes, officers. I assume this is about yesterday. The officers stepped inside carefully, looking around the kitchen. Mary joined John, her heart pounding. They were ready to tell the truth, to explain everything once again. The taller officer, who introduced himself as Officer Williams, spoke first. We want to understand what happened. Can you tell us in your own words? John took a deep breath. Of course. Yesterday, Karen came to our house and accused us of stealing her food. We tried to explain that everything we ate was ours, that we bought all the groceries ourselves. Mary added quietly. It was very upsetting. We were just having breakfast when she came in. Officer Williams nodded. Did she give you any proof that the food belonged to her? John shook his head. No. She said she had ordered groceries, but we have receipts for what we bought. We can show them to you. John reached into his pocket and pulled out a small stack of receipts from the local supermarket. Officer Williams took them, studying the dates and items carefully. This matches your story, the officer said, looking up at John and Mary. Have you had any previous issues with Karen? Mary shook her head. No. She's been difficult sometimes, but nothing like this before. Officer Williams glanced toward the hallway where Karen stood quietly. Her face was pale and tense. Karen, the officer said gently, can you explain why you felt the need to call the police? Karen swallowed nervously. I thought they were eating my food. I was upset and didn't think clearly. I'm sorry. Officer Williams looked at her kindly. It's important to talk to your neighbors when you have concerns. Calling the police should be a last step. Karen nodded, her eyes filling with tears. I understand. The officers spoke quietly among themselves for a moment. Then Officer Williams turned back to John and Mary. We believe there was a misunderstanding here. We don't think any laws were broken. John felt a wave of relief wash over him. Thank you, officers. Officer Williams smiled. If any problems come up again, please try to resolve them peacefully first. We're here to help if things get out of hand. As the officers prepared to leave, Karen stepped forward, looking at John and Mary. I'm truly sorry, she said, her voice shaky. I didn't mean to hurt you, Mary nodded. Thank you, Karen. We appreciate your apology. John smiled warmly. Maybe this can be a chance to start over. Karen hesitated, then gave a small nod before leaving the house quietly. After the officers left, John and Mary sat down again at their kitchen table. The tension that had been in the room just moments before slowly disappeared. Mary reached out and took John's hand. I'm glad the police understood, but I still feel sad about how close we came to losing our peace. John squeezed her hand. Me too. But we showed kindness, and that made all the difference. They finished their breakfast in a calm silence, grateful for the new chance to heal. Later that day, John went outside to work in the garden. The fresh air helped clear his mind. He looked around the neighborhood and saw a few neighbors chatting happily, going about their day. He realized how important trust was in their small community. Without it, the neighborhood would be just houses and strangers. But with it, it became a place full of friends and safety. As John worked, he thought about Karen. Maybe she was struggling more than anyone knew. Maybe her anger was a cry for help. He decided that next time he saw her, he would try to offer kindness instead of anger. Back inside, Mary cleaned the kitchen with a gentle smile. She felt hopeful for the first time in days. That evening, John and Mary sat on their porch watching the stars come out. Mary leaned her head on John's shoulder. "Do you think things will be different now?" John kissed her forehead. "I hope so. It takes time, but people can change." Mary nodded. "We have to believe in that." As they sat quietly, the world around them felt peaceful again, but deep down, they both knew that healing would not happen overnight. It would take patience, kindness, and courage to rebuild what had been broken. Still, they were ready to face the future together, one day at a time. The days after the police visit were quiet, but inside John and Mary things were far from peaceful. The kitchen, which once felt like the heart of their home, now seemed filled with silence and sadness. Their neighbors had heard about the incident, and while some offered kind words, others looked at them differently. Mary sat by the window, staring out at the street. She saw familiar faces passing by. Neighbors who once smiled and waved now avoided eye contact. It hurt more than she wanted to admit. How could one misunderstanding change so much? John noticed her sadness and tried to comfort her. "Mary, people are just scared of what they don't understand," he said softly. "We know the truth, and that's what matters." Mary nodded but said quietly, "I just wish everyone else could see it too." Despite their efforts to move on, the memory of that morning lingered. John found himself double-checking the locks on the doors, and Mary hesitated every time the doorbell rang. Their home felt less like a refuge and more like a place under watch. One afternoon, John was at work when a message arrived from their friend Sarah. She wanted to meet for coffee to talk. Mary agreed, hoping to find some comfort in a familiar face. At the cafe, Sarah listened carefully as Mary shared how the neighborhood's attitude had changed. "People are still whispering," Mary said. "Some have even stopped inviting us to gatherings." Sarah shook her head. "That's not right. You and John are good people. Don't let this change your kindness," Mary sighed. "It's hard not to feel hurt. It feels like we're being punished for something we didn't do." Sarah reached across the table and took Mary's hand. "I'm here for you, Mary. We'll get through this together." Back at home, Mary thought about Sarah's words. She wanted to believe that kindness would win, but the pain was deep. John returned from work and found Mary in the garden, her eyes red from tears. He sat beside her, pulling her close. "We can't control what others think," John said, "but we can control how we respond. Let's keep being kind, even when it's hard." Mary looked up at him, feeling strength in his words. "You're right. We can't give up." That night, as they lay in bed, Mary whispered, "Do you think Karen regrets what she did?" John was quiet for a moment. "I hope she does. I hope she finds peace." Days turned into weeks, and the neighborhood slowly returned to its usual rhythm. Some neighbors reached out, offering apologies or small gestures of kindness. John and Mary accepted these with grace, understanding that healing took time. But Karen remained distant, watching from afar with a guarded expression. John wondered what was behind her eyes, the anger, the sadness, the loneliness. One afternoon, as John was fixing the fence between their yards, Karen approached. She held a small basket covered with a cloth. "I made this for you," she said shyly. John took the basket, surprised. Inside were fresh vegetables from her garden. "Thank you, Karen," John said sincerely. "That's very kind of you." Karen nodded, then turned to leave. Before she walked away, she said softly, "Maybe we can start over." John watched her go, feeling a small hope bloom inside him. When he told Mary about the gesture, she smiled. That's a good sign. Together, John and Mary decided to invite Karen for dinner. It was a simple invitation, but it meant more than words could say. That evening, Karen arrived at their house nervous but willing. The three of them sat around the kitchen table sharing food and stories. For the first time since the incident, there was laughter. John realized that sometimes the hardest moments could lead to new beginnings. Mary looked at Karen and said, "We all make mistakes. What matters is what we do after." Karen nodded, tears in her eyes. "Thank you for giving me a chance." As the night grew late, John and Mary felt their home fill with warmth again. The kitchen was no longer a place of fear, but a place of hope. They knew there would still be challenges ahead, but together, they could face anything. After the quiet dinner with Karen, John and Mary felt a small but powerful change beginning to take place. The awkwardness between them was slowly melting away, replaced by a cautious hope. That night, as they sat together in their cozy living room, Mary sighed and smiled softly. "Maybe things can really get better," she said. John nodded. "I think so. It won't be easy, but we've already taken the first step." The next morning, John went outside early to tend to the garden. The soft sunlight touched the leaves and flowers, and the gentle breeze carried the fresh scent of earth. As he worked, he thought about how much their lives had changed in just a few weeks. It had started with a simple breakfast, and now they were slowly rebuilding the trust that had been broken. Mary joined John outside, carrying 2 cups of coffee. She handed one to him and sat on the bench nearby. "I want to do something," she said quietly. "Something to help bring the neighborhood back together." John looked at her with interest. "What do you have in mind?" Mary smiled. "A block party. A chance for everyone to come together, to share food and stories, and to remember what it means to be neighbors." John thought for a moment and then smiled. "That's a great idea. We can invite everyone, even Karen," Mary nodded. "Yes, especially Karen." Together, they began planning the party. They made flyers and walked around the neighborhood, inviting their neighbors with warm smiles. Some were surprised but happy to be included. Others were still hesitant, but John and Mary did not give up. As the day of the party approached, excitement grew. People began preparing dishes to share, and children practiced games to play. Mary noticed Karen working quietly in her garden, tending to flowers and vegetables. She waved and called out, "Karen, will you come to the party?" Karen looked up and smiled shyly. "Yes, I'll be there." On the morning of the block party, John and Mary woke early to prepare their home. The kitchen buzzed with activity as Mary baked cookies and John arranged tables in the yard. The smell of fresh bread and roasted vegetables filled the air. Neighbors started arriving, carrying dishes, bringing laughter and stories. The children ran and played, their happy voices echoing through the streets. Mary felt a warm glow in her heart as she saw the community coming together again. Karen arrived quietly, holding a basket of homemade jam. John greeted her with a smile, and Mary gave her a friendly hug. As the party continued, conversations flowed easily. Old friendships were renewed and new ones began. The neighbors shared stories about their lives, their hopes, and their dreams. At one point, Karen stood up and spoke softly. "I want to thank John and Mary for inviting me. I'm sorry for the trouble I caused. I hope we can be friends." The neighbors nodded and smiled, welcoming her words. John raised his glass. "To new beginnings." Everyone cheered. The block party lasted well into the evening. As the sun set and the stars appeared, John and Mary sat together, tired but happy. "This is what I've been hoping for," Mary said. "A community that cares for each other." John took her hand. "And it starts with kindness." In the days that followed, the neighborhood felt different. The walls that had divided people began to crumble, replaced by bridges of understanding and friendship. John and Mary noticed that even Karen seemed lighter, more at peace. One afternoon, as John helped Karen carry a heavy bag of soil, she smiled warmly. "Thank you for everything, John. You and Mary have changed my life." John smiled back. "We all needed a fresh start." Mary watched from her window, her heart full. She knew that healing was a journey, but it was one they were ready to take together. And in their small neighborhood, hope was blooming once again. The days turned into weeks, and the neighborhood blossomed with a renewed spirit. John and Mary's home, once shadowed by suspicion and fear, was now filled with laughter and friendship. The block party had been a turning point, but it was only the beginning of something deeper, a true sense of community. One bright morning, John stood at the edge of his garden, watching the children play in the street. Their joyful shouts echoed through the air, blending with the songs of birds perched in the trees. He smiled, feeling the warmth of the sun on his face, and took a deep breath. Mary joined him, holding 2 cups of coffee. She handed one to John and leaned against his shoulder. "It feels like everything is finally falling into place." John nodded. "It does, but we worked hard for this. It didn't happen by chance." Mary looked at him with gratitude. "I'm so glad we didn't give up." Just then, Karen approached, carrying a small potted plant. She smiled shyly and held it out to Mary. "For you," she said softly. "Thank you for being patient with me." Mary accepted the plant, her eyes shining. "Thank you, Karen. It means a lot." John stepped forward. "Would you like to join us for coffee?" Karen nodded. "I'd like that." The 3 of them sat together on the porch, sharing stories and laughter. It was a moment none of them had imagined possible just months before. As the morning moved on, neighbors began to stop by, drawn by the friendly scene. Conversations started naturally and smiles were exchanged freely. The barriers that had once divided them were now gone. Later that week, Mary received a letter in the mail. It was from the local community center, inviting her and John to join a committee focused on neighborhood support and kindness. John read the letter over her shoulder. "Looks like your idea of kindness is spreading." Mary smiled proudly. "It's not just my idea. It's all of us." Together, they attended the first meeting, sharing their story and encouraging others to build bridges instead of walls. The community center became a place where neighbors met regularly to plan events, help those in need, and create a safe, welcoming environment for everyone. One afternoon, John and Mary walked through the neighborhood, greeting friends and stopping to chat. Karen walked beside them, now a true part of their circle. As they passed the corner store, a young boy ran up to Mary, holding out a drawing. "This is for you," he said proudly. Mary took the picture, a colorful scene of houses, gardens, and smiling faces. She hugged the boy. "Thank you." "It's beautiful," John laughed. "Looks like the future is in good hands." That evening, John and Mary sat on their porch watching the sunset paint the sky with shades of pink and gold. Mary leaned her head on John's shoulder. "We've come so far," John kissed her forehead, "and we'll keep going." In the quiet of the evening, they felt a deep peace, one born from love, patience, and the courage to forgive. Their kitchen, once the center of conflict, was now the heart of their happy home. And as they looked toward the future, they knew that no matter what came their way, they would face it together with kindness lighting their path.